The Archetypes, Chapter 6, Becca. Joey has adjusted to the house pretty well, all things considered. He pulls his weight, does chores, helps Mum and that out. He even helped set up for Grandmother's birthday this week. That was a laugh. When he's surrounded by people, he's happy enough. But when he's on his own, or at least when he thinks I can't hear him, I catch him crying. All I want to do is swoop him up in my arms and tell him it's okay, but he won't have it. He insists he can handle it, so I remain on standby until he is in desperate need of my help. We've just sat down for breakfast, Joey, Zena and I. We like to eat as a family. Grandmother is the one cooking, Dad is still in bed as per, Mum is just getting baby, and Truffles is sniffing around Grandmother's feet, begging for some scraps. I have to remind her Truffles is a pig and can't eat bacon. Nonsense, she says. Pigs will eat anything, even their brethren. Still, I'd rather not have to deal with the subject of cannibalism whilst I'm eating my breakfast. We've had too much of that conversation recently. She drops the matter and carries a plate of rashers over to the table and places a couple on my plate. She goes to place some on Joey's, but I stop her. Oh yes, sorry dear, I forgot. And she moves on to Zena. Joey's parents weren't practicing Jews, and neither was he. He grew up in a fairly atheist household. His Bobby, though, the only family member he has left, is Jewish, and he wants to feel closer to her by embracing more of his heritage. It's a learning process for him, but we all support him, of course. It's really sweet seeing him make more of an effort to understand who he is and where he came from. He's called his Bubby every night since he lost his mum, and she's been talking him through it. I don't really understand how it all works, but it's a learning process and experience for us all. My family has never really connected to religion, but we know firsthand the universe is complicated, and that there are realms beyond ours we can't see, like beyond the veil where Grandad comes back and forth from. He explains it as an ever-shifting realm which caters to an individual's beliefs and connection to it. For him, it looks like a great lake where he can spend all his time fishing. I've broached the subject of asking Joey whether he wants him to try and contact his parents at least a couple of times since that day, and he assures me it's okay. They deserve time to rest together and reconnect, which made me well up, I'm not going to lie. Mum finally arrives with baby, who is being particularly fussy this morning. She places him in his high chair and he folds his arms in a sulk. Zena makes funny faces at him and he brightens up. The smart device in the kitchen pipes up with, "Silly sister." His database of words has increased a lot recently, but he still hasn't spoken with his mouth yet. Mum worries he may be too reliant on his powers and won't learn to speak what she refers to as manually. Grandmother assures her these things take time and shouldn't be rushed, and even if he never talks, it doesn't really matter. It's just a blessing to have him with us. I think Mum is just worried she won't be able to hear his first word. Her hearing has only gotten worse since she damaged her ear, and she has an appointment with the doctor coming up to see whether or not she'll need an operation. I almost forgot. Grandmother swans over to a plastic bag sitting on a chair by the door. She's tailed by Truffles, who's still on the hunt for food. He waddles away disappointed when she produces a doll from the bag, and not food. Delphi, must you bring that thing out whilst we're trying to eat? It gives me the creeps. Mum shakes her head, but Grandmother just ignores her and places her birthday gift on the corner of the table. Rebecca the doll has this gift that somehow stares us all down at once, and we all look at each other visibly uncomfortable. Why did Joan get you that thing anyway? Zena asks. Grandmother shrugs. She's always been a lover of antiques, probably why she loves me. We all sigh at her awful joke and she almost wets herself laughing. Good morning, my beautiful family. Dad finally emerges and kisses Mum on her forehead before blowing raspberries at baby. As he turns around to get a good sleepy look at us, he jumps out of his skin seeing Rebecca. Mother! Rebecca doesn't belong on the table. Take her to your room or something. Grandmother picks Becca up in a huff. Darling, you should be nicer to your sister. She's very sensitive. Honestly, at this point, I can't tell if she's teasing or has become so senile she thinks the doll is actually my aunt. She leaves the kitchen carrying her. We're all thankful for her to be out of our sight and tuck into our food. I found myself laying on the sofa with my hand resting on my stomach. I'm well and truly stuffed after that breakfast. I think I'll be dreaming of those eggs for weeks to come. Grandmother still hasn't returned from her room, and Dad is badgering me to go check on her. I complain and ask why me, but he just does his Not a very good impression of a stern look, and I cave in and force myself off the sofa. I knock twice on Grandmother's door and ask her if she's decent. She does that to us all the time. She's doubled down on it now Joey has moved in. She rightfully assumes we hang out in just our boxes whilst we're in our room. She doesn't answer. I assume she's just fallen asleep or something, so I push the door open ajar just to check on her. She's old. You don't know what might have happened to her. She's laying down on her bed holding Becca close to her chest. At first glance, she looks asleep until I notice her eyes are wide open and glowing white. I call out her name, but she doesn't answer, so I scurry over to check her pulse. I know she's probably just walking past right now, but usually she does that sitting, not laying, so it's best to check. As I place my fingers to her wrist, I suddenly come over all faint and collapse to the ground by the side of Grandmother's bed. 1970. I've never walked the past before. I didn't even know it was possible for anyone else aside from Grandmother. I don't think she did either, since she looks stunned that I'm standing right next to her. Charles? Is that you? She asks, pinching me on the cheek to make sure she's not seeing things. I complain about the pain, and she stands there for a long moment, not sure what to say. I look around and see what looks to be an open park. There are a few women walking around, pushing the bulkiest prams I've ever seen. I ask Grandmother when we are, and she seems to shake her back to her senses. 1970. This is the park down by the creek. You know the one. I nod in response. I ask if the people can see us, and she shakes her head. No, we can only observe, not interfere, like ghosts. I'm entranced by how bizarre it feels to be standing in the past. The air feels so different, so much cleaner. I didn't realise how thick the air was in 2022 until coming here. I ask why we're here. Grandmother stays silent. Her heart is beating fast. I can tell she's anxious and doesn't know what to say. Just as she looks like she's about to open her mouth, a small girl runs between us, laughing with excitement. Rebecca! Grandmother calls out. I look at her, but her mouth hasn't moved. I turn to see a much younger version of her chasing after the little girl. Stop! You'll hurt yourself. A man is standing with her. It takes me a moment to realise it's a younger version of Oswald, another of Grandmother's partners. She'll be all right, Delphi. Let her go. He tries to reassure her. The pair get into a small argument over the girl, who I figure is their daughter. I tell Grandmother I didn't know that she and Oswald had a daughter together. We don't talk about her a lot. The memory, it's too painful. I ask her what memory she's talking about, and she looks over to Rebecca. I follow her gaze as the bee lands on her neck. Rebecca screams, trying to sway it away from her. As Grandmother and Oswald run past us to help, before they can reach her, Rebecca's skin hardens into porcelain, and she collapses to the ground as the bee flies away in shock. The doll Grandmother adores so much really is my aunt. She's not senile at all, and we all just ignored her. I apologise over and over, trying to stop myself from breaking down into tears. Walk with me, Grandmother says as she begins walking along a thick brown line that's appeared below our feet. As we both walk along, the scene around us swooshes past, like we're looking at the scenery out a train window. 1976. We've entered the dining room where Grandmother and all her partners are sitting around a table, with Rebecca in the middle. They're discussing what to do with her. It's been years, sweetheart. Jane places her hand on Grandmother's. I don't think she's coming out anytime soon, Betty, another of Grandmother's partners, bluntly points out. Oswald doesn't look up from the table. Grandad has a hand on his shoulder, comforting him. Hugh is growing up fast. He starts primary school soon. He's just going to start asking difficult questions about why you treat her doll like your daughter, Betty continues. Grandmother slams her hand on the table. I've never seen her so passionate. She is my daughter. She looks around the room, pleading for any of her partners to let her carry on, trying to release Rebecca from her porcelain armour. But they all look at each other instead. Ken is the one that speaks up. We think it's best if she's kept somewhere you can't see her. She only causes you pain seeing her in this way. Grandmother closes her eyes, takes a long breath, and looks over to Oswald, who is now looking back. Do you agree, Oswald? He nods. It's just as painful for me seeing her as well. I think we need to accept she's gone and focus on Hugh and David. Becca will always be their sister, but she's gone now. Can you hear her heart? Grandmother asks. My grandmother, the older modern version. I try to listen for her heartbeat coming from Becca's doll, but I can't. Grandmother's body relaxes, the weight she's been holding for decades finally removed. We made the right choice after all. She looks back to the scene in front of us and begins describing what's happening to catch me up. Eventually, I agreed to let Joan take Rebecca and keep her safe at hers. She lives the furthest from us, so I went round hers the least. She kept her safe for all these years until I asked to see her again for my birthday. Now with baby and Josiah, our family feels complete. I wanted to bring her home with the rest of her family. She loves you all. I think for a moment that she's speaking from a place of hope, of what she'd think Rebecca would think, until I repeat the words in my head and realise she means it literally. Rebecca's soul has long since passed. It wasn't immediate. She suffocated in the protective armour she'd created. That was her power. As it turns out, to cocoon herself for protection. But it was a curse because she was too young to understand how to properly work it out. So she was trapped. Something within her remained, though. The line appears below our feet again, and I walk it instinctively now. It takes us back to the present. Grandmother sits up in bed, and I let go of her wrist. She places Becca next to her, and I jump back in horror as she tilts her head. She can move. She's more of an automation than a living, breathing girl, but her soul is trapped. And the longer it remained, the more it ingrained itself into the shell. She became an archetype. Perfectly harmless, just very, as you all like to point out, creepy. I apologise again for not realising. You remind me of her, Charles. I ask her what she means. I'm not sure, but I think out of all my grandchildren, you are the most similar to how I believe she would have turned out if she was blessed with a longer life. Of course, she wouldn't be a handsome young man like you, but it's a case of personality over gender, don't you think? I agree, and admire Becca as she truly is. I tell her that Joey calls me Chucky because he thinks of me like a cute and creepy doll. Grandmother smiles warmly and hands Becca to me. I always knew it. You two were destined to meet. As I hold my aunt, the porcelain shell begins breaking apart and sinking into my skin. It's hollow inside, but I can sense Becca's spirit finally being set free. I look down at my hand to see the image of a doll enclosed in a deep red light. My skin begins hardening as I feel my new armour enveloping me. I feel my hair turn to string and my eyes marble eyes. Grandmother looks terrified for a moment until I open my mouth and show her I have control. She pulls me into a hug and my skin begins turning back to normal. We both re-emerge into the living room, and Dad asks how we are. Everything is better now, Grandmother says in a way that probably came across as ominous to Dad, who had no idea what had happened. How's my sister? He jokes. I look to Grandmother, hoping he hasn't upset her, but she laughs back. She's happy in her new home. You don't have to worry about her now. Dad brushes his forehead with the back of his hand. What a relief. It's bad enough looking after 4 children and a wife. I don't need the responsibility of looking after a younger sister as well. He laughs again. Older sister. Grandmother corrects as she walks past us back to the kitchen. What was that about? Dad asks, and I just shrug. I get the feeling this painful chapter of Grandmother's life was closed. Nobody else needs to know. I follow Grandmother into the kitchen because going back in time is hungry work apparently. And even though I was only gone for a short amount of time, it felt like hours. Ah, you got the post-time travel rumblies too, huh? Grandmother laughs as she begins buttering a slice of bread. Would you like a sandwich? I tell her that sounds like just what I need, and she pulls another couple of slices out. You can't both be hungry again, Mum wonders in trying to settle Baby. What's up with him? Grandmother points her butter knife at Baby. I don't know, he's been extra fussy today. He must have a bad tummy or something. Which you both will have if you keep raiding the cupboards. Poor Truffles will think Christmas has come. We all laugh as I instinctively look down to see Truffles, only to find he's not there. That's odd. Has anyone seen Xena? I just went to ask her to see if she can see any toothpaste in the shop. Dad also enters the room. What have I told you about exploiting our children's powers? Mum scolds him. Since both Xena and Truffles have gone, we assume she's taken him for an early walk, and I get on with my sandwich. After I finish, I head up to my room to check on Joey, only to find he has gone. I tell myself he must have joined Xena on the walk and decide to take a nap. wrapping myself up in one of his shirts so I can smell him on with me. Charles, wake up, Dad yells me awake. I rub my eyes and realise it's dark out. How long did I nap for? They're not back, and it's been hours. We need to go look for them. I haven't fully processed what he said, but I'm already on my feet getting ready. Truffles never goes on walks for this long, especially not if it means he misses his afternoon feeding. I can feel in my gut something bad has happened. I want to retreat into my new porcelain shell, but I don't. I need to find them and bring them home safely.